I woke up in a hotel suite I had not booked, with a wedding band on my left hand I had not bought, and a woman across from the bed looking at me like she had been waiting for hours. She was already dressed. Cream silk blouse, navy slacks, no shoes. Her hair was pinned at the nape. She had been awake for a very long time. The light in the room was the gray gold of Las Vegas at 6 in the morning. My head was a slow, expensive pulse. On the nightstand was a marriage certificate with both our names on it, signed in handwriting I did not recognize as my own. She smiled and said, "Good morning, wife. If you want to hear uncensored, too hot for YouTube stories, check out my Patreon in the description, tell us where you are watching from, and subscribe." I sat up too fast. The room shifted around me, the way rooms shift when your body is still catching up to the night before, and the band on my left hand caught the light and turned it into something I had to acknowledge. Platinum, brushed finish. A second band stacked beside it, thinner, with a single stone set into it, set so cleanly that even at 6 in the morning with my eyes still adjusting, I could tell it had not been bought from a Vegas chapel display case. I stared at her. "I'm sorry," I said. "I think I am about to say something very rude, and I want to apologize in advance." She tilted her head, almost a quarter inch, the way someone does when they are considering whether to be amused or offended, and have decided neither would be useful. "Go on, Marlo," she said. She knew my name. She knew my name the way someone knows a name they have used before, not the way someone knows a name they had just learned the night before from a marriage certificate. She said it the way it was meant to be said, with the soft mar at the front and the low fall on the second syllable that nobody in a Vegas chapel would have said correctly the first time. "Who are you?" I asked. She did not answer immediately. She set down the cup of coffee she had been holding. She had been holding a cup of coffee. I had not registered the cup until now, and she folded her hands in her lap, and she looked at me with a steady, unflinching attention that I felt all the way through the wedding band on my finger. "Celine Marchetti," she said. "We met 5 years ago at the Devereaux opening on the Lower East Side. We have been at the same event 11 times since. I represent Marisol Aguero, whom you profiled for the magazine in October of the year before last. I have, at last count, sat at the same dinner table as you on 6 separate occasions. You sent me a Christmas card 2 years ago that I have on the corkboard in my office, which means you will find it in the apartment in Tribeca whenever you decide to verify any of this." She let that settle. "Last night," she said, "you asked me to marry you, in a chapel 3 blocks from this hotel, at 11:52. You wrote your vows on a cocktail napkin. We both signed the certificate with 2 witnesses, one of whom was your bachelorette weekend party host, Nico, and one of whom was a woman from Kansas City who had also gotten married 30 minutes earlier and was crying very quietly when she signed our paperwork." She paused, not for breath, but for the audible quality of the silence she was leaving for me to step into. "You wore a black dress to the chapel, sleeveless. The strap of the right shoulder had been mended once. You had a small scar on your collarbone that I noticed under the chapel lights, which, incidentally, you got at a swim meet when you were 14, because at 1 in the morning you told me about it. You smelled like the bourbon you had been drinking for an hour. You walked the length of that aisle in a pair of heels I would not personally have chosen for a chapel floor that uneven, and you did not stumble once, which was, frankly, more grace than I would have given you credit for given the bourbon." She paused. "And here we are," she said. "I don't remember any of that," I said. "I know," she said. "I don't remember meeting you 11 times before. I know. I don't remember marrying you. I know that too." I looked at the certificate on the nightstand. My signature was a looser, more drunken version of itself, but it was mine. Hers was beneath it, neat and contained and surgical in its small precision, like she had decided in advance that whatever else this night was, the document would be legible. "This is annullable," I said. "It is. I want to annul it." "I know." 3. I waited. She did not say anything else. "Will you sign?" I asked. She looked at me for a long, calm moment. "No," she said. The room did the thing rooms do when a sentence lands with more weight than the air can absorb. Outside, a vacuum cleaner had started somewhere on the floor below ours. "I'm sorry? I will not sign," she said. "I am not going to make this convenient for you." "You don't get to do that," I said. "I do, actually. Annulment requires both parties to agree the marriage was entered without intent. I will not make that statement, because it is not true. You proposed clearly. You wrote a coherent set of vows. You verified your identity with the chapel office and you signed a document I did not coerce you into signing. The marriage was entered with intent." "I was drunk, Celine." "Yes," she said, "and you were entirely articulate. I have video." She picked up her phone from the side table and turned the screen toward me. I could see the timestamp, 11:52. I could see myself, in a black slip dress I half remembered putting on, kneeling in a chapel aisle on one knee, with one hand around hers, saying something I could not hear from across the room because she had the volume off. She turned the screen back. "I will show you the rest of it when you are ready to watch it," she said. "You are not ready." "I don't want to watch it," I said. "I know." I stood up. The room moved. I sat down again. I held my head for a moment. "Why are you doing this?" I asked. She did not answer right away. When she did, her voice had not changed register, but something in her shoulders had. Some small loosening. "Because last night you told me something I have wanted you to say for 5 years," she said. "And I am not going to pretend you did not say it just because you do not remember saying it." I looked at her. "What did I tell you?" "I am not going to tell you that yet," she said. "I am not going to tell you that the morning after in a hotel room, while you are processing the existence of me. You will get the full account when you are no longer trying to figure out whether I am a stranger you can dismiss. That is not a punishment. It is a courtesy." "Solene." "Marlo," she said. "I am going to fly back to New York this afternoon. You are welcome to be on the same plane. We have a marriage to sort out. I am not going to dissolve it on a Tuesday morning in Las Vegas because that is not what I want. What I want is for us to talk about this sober, in the city we both live in, with both of us having had time to think." "I have thought," I said. "You have processed for 40 minutes, she said. "That is not thinking." She stood up. She crossed the room to her overnight bag and slid her feet into a pair of heels that had been arranged neatly beside it. Everything she did with the kind of unhurried economy that made every movement feel deliberate. "There is coffee on the credenza," she said. "And there is ibuprofen in the bathroom. Your phone is on the desk. Nico has been calling you for 2 hours. I told her you were sleeping, and that I would let you call her when you woke up. You spoke to my best friend." "Yes." "What did you tell her?" A pause. "I told her her name was on the marriage certificate as a witness," Solene said, "and that I would let you call her when you were ready to discuss it. She had questions. I declined to answer them. They were yours to answer." She picked up her purse, slung it over her shoulder. "My flight is at 4, she said. "There is a seat next to me on the same flight if you want it. I had it held under your name. You do not have to take it." She walked to the door, paused, did not turn around. "And Marlo?" she said. "Yes?" "You should know the dress is mine." I looked down. I now realized, wearing a slip dress, cream silk, bias cut, beautifully tailored, far too well made for anything I would have packed for a bachelorette weekend. "You changed me?" I said. The word came out sharper than I meant it. "You changed yourself," she said. "Last night around 2:30, you announced that the dress you had worn to the chapel was, and I am quoting you, an indignity to the institution of marriage, which is a phrase I was not aware had ever been used in earnest. You went into my bag and put on the slip. You insisted. I did not undress you, Marlo. I have not touched you. The bed has one indent and it is the one you are sitting on." She left. I sat in the silence she had created. After a moment, I looked at the chair she had been sitting in. There was no indent in it either. She had, I realized, been sitting completely still for hours. I called Nico. She picked up on the half ring. "Tell me you did not just marry the gallery woman," she said. "What gallery woman?" "The one from your magazine. The one you talk about the way you talk about the thing you are pretending is not a thing. The one whose Christmas card you keep on your refrigerator because you say it has nice typography." "Nico." "What?" I pressed my hand to my forehead. I tried to find the shape of the night before in the haze of my hangover. I could find the chapel. I could find a green velvet sofa I did not remember entering. I could find the moment at midnight where I had stood on a curb laughing about something I had said, and a hand had been on the small of my back steadying me. I could find none of the words. "I got drunk," I said slowly, "and I married a woman I don't remember, and she remembers everything, and she won't divorce me." A very long silence. "Babe," Nico said. "I love you. I have been your best friend for 14 years. And I am going to tell you something, and I need you to listen to it without interrupting me." "What?" "You have been in love with that woman since the Devereaux opening. I have been waiting for one of you to do something about it for 5 years. Last night you did something about it. I was a witness. I have video. I have spoken to her 3 times this morning, and she is, in addition to being beautiful and composed and clearly out of your league, the only person I have ever met who has made me feel like my best friend would actually be looked after if I let her go. Nico, I am not signing an annulment, Marlo. You don't get to. I am not lying to a notary. You meant it. You can ask me whatever questions you want and I will answer them, But I am not going to pretend you didn't propose on one knee in a chapel in front of me last night, because you did, and it was the most coherent I have seen you in 3 years. I closed my eyes. How drunk was I? Very. But also not in the way you are imagining. You weren't slurring. You weren't loud. You were that specific kind of drunk where the part of you that is usually too scared to say a thing has gone quiet, and the part of you that has been wanting to say it the whole time finally has the floor. You did not fall over. You did not embarrass yourself. You walked up to her at the bar at the Bellagio, and you sat down on the sofa beside her and you said, "I have been not telling you something for 5 years and I am done not telling you." And she said, "Then tell me." And you did, for about 40 minutes. And I sat across the room with the others and pretended I could not hear you, because that is what a best friend does when something she has been waiting for is finally happening 4 feet from her. Nico. And then you wrote on a cocktail napkin and you handed it to her, and she read it, and she did not say anything for about a minute. I was watching the clock because I wanted to know how long it took her. A full minute. And then she said something quietly to you that I could not hear, and you stood up, and the two of you walked out of the bar holding hands, and the rest of us followed you to the chapel because we were not going to miss it. Nico, I am going to throw up. I know. You let me get married. I let you do something you have wanted to do for 5 years. There is a distinction. There is no distinction. There is the distinction of the woman who has just sent me a text asking what your favorite breakfast is so she can have something delivered to your room before you wake up. That is the distinction. I sat in the cream slip dress that was not mine, on the edge of a bed I had not booked, with my best friend telling me that the marriage I had no memory of was a marriage I had meant. "I will call you back," I said. "You're getting on the 4 o'clock with her," Nico said. It was not a question. "I will call you back." I hung up. I went into the bathroom. I took 2 ibuprofen with the bottle of water she had set on the counter, which I noticed only because everything in the bathroom had been set out with the particular small generosity of someone who had been making the morning easier for me without making it visible. The dress hanging on the back of the door, a different one, simpler, navy linen, exactly my size, was hers. There was a note in her handwriting on the counter beside the sink. "This will fit you. Wear what is comfortable. The slip is yours to keep regardless of what you decide. S." I got in the shower. I cried for 40 seconds, the way you cry when something true has happened to you and you have not yet decided whether to let it through. Then I stopped, because I have always been a person who decides what to do with my crying rather than the other way around, and I needed to think. I thought about Solene Marchetti. I thought about whether I had in fact been at 11 events with her. I thought about the Devereaux opening, which I could remember in pieces. The wine, the noise, a woman in a black suit at the far end of the gallery whose laugh had been the sharpest, cleanest sound in the room. The way she had been explaining a small painting to a younger collector and had glanced up and caught my eye and looked at me for 1 full second before smiling and turning back. I thought about the Christmas card. It was in my apartment. I had not put it on the corkboard, because I did not have a corkboard. I had put it in a drawer in my desk, in the place where I kept the things I wanted to know I had, but did not want to look at every day. I thought about her sitting in that chair for hours, watching me sleep, without putting her feet up, without leaving, without making the morning anything but exactly what it needed to be for both of us. I thought about getting on the 4 o'clock plane. I got out of the shower. I put on the navy linen dress. It fit. I did not get on the same plane. I got on the next one. It is very important to me that you understand this distinction. I got on the next one because if I had gotten on the same one, I would have been a person who had decided, and I had not decided yet. I needed 3 more hours of altitude to think. I told myself this. I am telling you this. I am also aware that there is a difference between a person who refuses to get on the same plane and a person who books the next available flight to the same destination, and I want to be honest about the version of me who did the second thing. The flight was quiet. I sat in a window seat with my forehead against the cold pane, and the cream slip folded in my carry-on and the wedding band still on my finger, because I had tried to take it off in the airport bathroom, and had stopped halfway through. I had not been able to articulate even to myself why I had stopped. I had simply slid it back on and washed my hands and walked out. I tried to remember the chapel. I got further than I had at the hotel. I got the small reception desk with a plastic flower arrangement on it. I got the woman from Kansas City who had been crying. I got a hand on my hand, steadying me when I tried to sign too fast. I got a low voice near my ear saying, "Slow down, there is no rush, we have all night." Her voice, Solene's voice, saying we. I closed my eyes against the window. I landed at JFK at 11:30 at night. There was a car waiting for me. I had not booked a car. There was a driver standing in the arrivals area with a sign that said Pace, M. He was very polite. He did not speak unless I spoke to him. He drove me directly to my apartment in Carroll Gardens and helped me with my bag and informed me, only when I asked, that the car had been arranged that afternoon. I stood on the sidewalk with my keys in my hand and looked up at my own building, and I thought, she sent me a car because she was not certain I would have remembered to book one. And she did not want me coming home from JFK at midnight on a stranger's app driver after the night I had just had. I went upstairs. I opened the drawer in my desk. The Christmas card was there. The typography was, in fact, very nice. The interior had her handwriting on it. To Marlo, your piece on Marisol changed the way I look at her work. Thank you for that. S. I had read it 11 times when I first received it. I had read it 3 times since. I had not, until this moment, allowed myself to consider why I had kept it in the drawer instead of throwing it away or filing it. I sat down at the desk. I put the card flat in front of me. I looked at the way she had drawn the cross of the T in Marlo, a little long, slightly downward sloping at the right end, the way she signed her own initial, a single S without the elaboration most people my age put on the letter. I looked at the precision of the spacing. I looked at the absence of any flourish. The card had not been the throwaway gesture of a gallerist sending out 50 Christmas cards to magazine editors who had been kind to her artists. The card had been, I was now allowing myself to recognize, the smallest legitimate move she could make toward me without crossing a line she had, evidently, decided not to cross. I had kept it in the drawer because I had known. I had simply refused, for 2 years, to know that I knew. I took off the navy linen dress and hung it on the back of my bedroom door. I put on a pair of soft gray sweatpants and an old shirt. I poured myself a glass of water. I sat on the kitchen counter with the wedding band still on my finger, where it had been since I tried to remove it at JFK and stopped halfway through. There was a knock at the door. I knew before I opened it who it was. She was standing in the hallway in a different blouse, gray silk this time, the same precision, and she was holding a folder. I will not stay long, she said. I wanted you to have these, and I wanted to give them to you in person. I let her in. She did not sit down. She set the folder on my kitchen counter and stepped back from it, the way you would set down something you were not asking to be opened. What is it? The video, she said. Transcribed. The vows you wrote on the napkin, photographed and typed. The marriage certificate, certified copy. The receipt from the chapel, a copy of the witness affidavits. A list of every event I have been at with you for the past 5 years, with the dates, because I expect you to want to verify it. And my attorney's contact information in case you want to retain your own to discuss the dissolution timeline that I am not going to participate in. I stared at the folder. You are not going to participate in? I am going to be your wife, Marlo, she said. Not against your will, not as a hostage situation, but not as a clerical error either. What does that mean? It means, she said, that I am going to ask you, in this kitchen, sober, with no alcohol involved on either side, and with you wearing a dress that you chose, the question I would have asked you in November if I had been brave enough. I felt my pulse in my hands. What question? She looked at me. Her face did not flinch. The composure that had been holding her together all morning and all afternoon and through a 5-hour flight she had taken alone after I declined to take it with her, that composure was still holding, but I could see the cost of it now in the way her shoulders sat, the way they had not loosened since the chapel. I am going to ask you, she said, to give me 30 days. 30 days for what? To know me sober, to see me in your real life, to go to the gallery, to come to my opening, to meet my friends, to let me make you dinner, to sit across a table from each other in the city we both live in, and find out whether the version of you that proposed in the chapel was a lie, or whether it was the truest thing you have said in 5 years. And if I say no, then I will call my attorney in the morning, and I will sign whatever needs to be signed, and I will not contact you again. I promise you that without conditions. And if I say yes, then for 30 days you will be my wife in the way I would like you to be. We will share dinners. I will not touch you unless you ask me to. I will not stay over. I will not be in this apartment after 11 o'clock. I will go to my own apartment and you will go to your bed. At the end of the 30 days, you will tell me what you decide, and I will accept it. Either decision. The kitchen was quiet around us. You proposed to me last night, she said. I have not asked for anything that is not in the document I just handed you. I am asking for 30 days because I am not willing to lose you because of something you did drunk that I believe you would have done sober if either of us had been brave enough to bring it up at one of the 11 events we attended, together over 5 years. I looked at her. I looked at the folder on my counter. I thought about the chair she had sat in for hours. I thought about the navy linen dress hanging in my closet that fit me perfectly. I thought about the Christmas card in the drawer. What did I say in the vows? I asked. Her face moved. One muscle. Just one. That is the part I have not been ready to repeat to you, she said. I have been carrying that since 1 in the morning. I have been carrying it on the plane and in the cab and standing in your hallway. I will tell you. But I want you to ask me when you are ready to hear it, and not because you want to win an argument. Celine. She waited. What did I say? She closed her eyes. For 1 second. Just one. When she opened them, she looked at me the way she had looked at me in the hotel room at 6 in the morning, except now it was nearly midnight and we were in my kitchen, and the entire weight of what had been between us for 5 years was in her face without anywhere left to hide. You said, she said carefully, that you had been in love with me since the Devereaux opening, and that you had decided 2 years ago that you were never going to tell me because you did not believe I felt the same, and because you had watched me too long not to know what I would have said if I had felt it. You said you were sorry for the years it took. You said you had spent every event we attended together cataloging the way I held a glass so that you would have something private to take home. You said. She stopped. She put her hand on the kitchen counter for a moment, the way someone steadies herself. You said you were going to marry me anyway, even if I did not feel the same, because you had decided it was better to have done it once than not at all. You said the chapel was 3 blocks away. You said you wanted me to know that the version of you that was sober had loved me longer than the version of you that was drunk. And then you wrote those words on a cocktail napkin and you signed it, and you put it in front of me on a bar and you said, Celine Marchetti, will you marry me? The kitchen was very quiet. And you said yes, I said. Yes, she said. Why? She looked at me. Because I have loved you for 4.5 years, she said. She did not move. I did not move. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere outside on the street, a car alarm went off and stopped. 30 days, she said quietly. I tried to speak. I could not. Immediately. I need to think, I said. I know. I need. Tomorrow, she said. Or the day after. Or next week. I am not asking for an answer tonight. I am asking you to consider it. That is all. She stepped toward the door. She paused at it. She did not turn around. Marlowe, she said. Yes? For what it is worth, she said. If you had asked me sober, in November I would have said yes too. She left. I stood in my kitchen at 11:58 at night with a folder on the counter and a wedding band on my finger and a slip dress folded in my suitcase that was apparently mine to keep regardless of what I decided. I sat down on the kitchen floor. I did not cry this time. I sat with my back against the cabinet and I thought about a green velvet sofa that I now remembered, just barely, was in the bar at the Bellagio. I thought about her sitting on it, holding a glass of red wine at the stem, saying something I could not remember, while I leaned toward her across the small low table between us with the particular gravitational pull of a person who had decided, at some point in the previous 4 hours, that she was going to do something she had been not doing for 5 years. I closed my eyes. I remembered for 1 second the cocktail napkin under my hand. I remembered the pen, I remembered the words I wrote, not all of them, but one phrase. I have been cataloging the way you hold a glass for 5 years and I would like to do it for the rest of my life. I had written that, in my own handwriting, on a napkin. To a woman I had been telling myself for 5 years was just a professional acquaintance whose Christmas card had nice typography. I opened my eyes. I picked up the folder on the counter. I sat back down on the kitchen floor with it. I opened it. Page 1 was the napkin, photographed in good light, on what looked like a clean white surface, probably the marble of her own kitchen counter 12 hours earlier when she had carried it home and laid it out and considered what to do with it. The handwriting was mine, looser than usual, forward-leaning. The ink had bled in 2 places where the pen had stayed too long against the napkin's absorbent fibers. I read what I had written. Celine, I have been cataloging the way you hold a glass for 5 years, and I would like to do it for the rest of my life. I have loved you since the Devereaux opening. I decided 2 years ago I was never going to say so. I am saying so now 3 blocks from a chapel because I have decided I would rather be wrong out loud than careful and silent for another 5 years. I am sorry it took this long. Marry me. There were 5 lines of it. My signature underneath, hers underneath mine, in the small contained handwriting I now recognized from the certificate. I read it twice. I closed the folder. I picked up my phone. I scrolled to her name in my contacts, which I had saved as Celine Marchetti 2/2 Marchetti Gallery in October of the year before last, the day I had profiled Marisol, and which I had never updated and never deleted. I typed, 30 days. I did not press send. I sat with my thumb above the screen and I thought about every single one of the 11 events. The way she had appeared at the edge of every one of them. The way I had always known where she was in a room without looking. The way I had told myself, for 5 years, that I noticed her because she had a striking face and an articulate way of talking about painting, and not because the noticing was the largest unspoken fact of my professional life. I thought about the 4-hour gap between her plane and mine, about what it meant that I had taken the next flight instead of the same one, about what it meant that I had taken any flight at all, when I could have stayed in Vegas one more night, or two, and made her wait. I had not made her wait. I pressed send. The reply came back in less than 30 seconds. Thank you. That was all. I sat on the kitchen floor with my phone in my hand and the wedding band on my finger and the navy linen dress hanging in my closet, and I understood, for the first time without being able to look away from it, that I had married Celine Marchetti because I had wanted to marry Celine Marchetti, and the only thing the alcohol had done was make me brave enough to do the thing I had wanted to do for 5 years. The 30 days were going to be the longest 30 days of my life. I was going to let them be. The 30-day clock began the next morning at 9. Or rather, it had begun at midnight when I pressed send, but I gave myself the night to sleep on it, because the version of me that had survived 3 flights and a wedding I did not remember needed at least one full unconscious night before she could be expected to do anything else. I woke up at 6 with the wedding band still on my finger and a text on my phone from Celine that read, "I do not want to overstep. If you would like to start today, I am free. If you would like more time, take it. Either is acceptable." I read it twice. Then I wrote back, "Today." She wrote back, "Where would you like to begin?" A good question. I thought about it. I thought about the gallery. I thought about a coffee place we had both been to with mutual friends. I thought about her apartment. I wrote, "My apartment, 11, bring nothing." She wrote back, 11. I made coffee. I changed my sheets, which I did not need to change, but the act of doing something in advance of her arrival was useful to my body. I cleaned the kitchen counter where I had left the folder the night before, and I put the folder in the same drawer as the Christmas card, because the drawer was apparently the place I kept the things I was not yet ready to look at directly. I put on a pair of dark jeans and a sweater the color of the cream slip dress, and I made a second pot of coffee, and at exactly 11 there was a knock at my door. She was holding nothing. She had taken me at my word. She was wearing a black turtleneck and gray wool slacks, and her hair was loose for the first time I had seen it in 5 years, and she looked at me from the hallway like a woman who had walked into a room with no map and had decided to navigate by paying close attention. "Hi," I said. "Hi," she said. "Come in." She came in. She did not take off her coat. She stood in my front room with her hands in her coat pockets and looked at me with the same steady attention I was beginning to recognize as her natural register when she was uncertain about her welcome. "I have not been here before," she said. "I know. I do not know what part of you would like me to start with. I considered this. The version of you that sat in a chair for 6 hours watching me sleep," I said. "Start with that one." She blinked. Just once. The composure held, but I had learned, over the previous 24 hours, to read her millimeters. "All right," she said. She took off her coat. She hung it on the hook by my door. She accepted the cup of coffee I poured her. She sat at my kitchen counter on the stool farthest from the one I had pulled out for myself, which was the kind of distance someone establishes when they want to make absolutely certain they are not crowding the person they are trying not to crowd. "I did not sit there for 6 hours," she said. "I sat there for 4. The first hour I was on a phone call with the chapel office, confirming the paperwork and the witness affidavits. The second hour I was talking with Nico in the lobby, who wanted to check on you. The third hour I came back upstairs and watched you for about 40 minutes before I decided that watching you was not something I had earned the right to do without your consent, and I went and sat in the bathroom with the door open. You sat in the bathroom. I read on my phone. I came back into the room only when the sky started to turn and I wanted to be in the chair when you woke up, because I did not want you waking up to the wedding band and the certificate without somebody in the room to explain the existence of either. I looked at her over the rim of my coffee cup. You read in my hotel bathroom for 2 hours. Yes, Celine. Marlowe. That is the gentlest version of being a stalker I have ever heard described. She smiled. Not a millimeter smile this time. A real one, brief, that traveled all the way to her eyes for the first time since I had met her this version of herself. "It is the only kind of stalker I am willing to be," she said. I laughed. I did not mean to. It came out short and surprised, and it landed in my kitchen with a quality I had not expected, which was relief. She watched me laugh, the same way she had watched me sleep, carefully, not collecting it, just being present for it. "What now?" I said when the laugh had passed. "That is your question to ask," she said. I am here for whatever the next thing is. What would you do, I said, if you were me? A pause. That is unfair, she said. I know. Answer it anyway. She set down her coffee cup. She rotated it once on the counter, a half turn, because her hands needed something to do that was not folded in her lap. If I were you, she said, I would ask me to leave my coat on. I would put on my own coat. I would walk with me to a place that was mine, but not the gallery, because the gallery is too obvious. I would take me to the apartment in Tribeca. I would let me show you what my real life looks like when I am not in a hotel room in Las Vegas trying not to make eye contact with someone I have been in love with for 4.5 years. I studied her. Get your coat, I said. She got her coat. The apartment in Tribeca was on the 4th floor of a building that had been a printing house in the 1890s and was now the kind of building that had a doorman who knew everyone by name and pretended not to. The doorman said good morning to her by surname when we walked in, and his eyes flicked to me, and he said good morning to me, and he did not say wife. But the registering of my presence was its own quiet acknowledgement. The apartment was not what I had expected. I had expected something that announced itself, the way some gallerist's apartments announce themselves, full of expensive art arranged with the showroom neutrality of a portfolio. Soline's apartment was warmer than that. The kitchen was small and lived in. There was a long pine table in the dining area with 3 different dents in it from years of regular use. The walls had artwork on them, but the artwork was in conversation with the rooms, not with a future buyer. A small Marisol Aguero hung over the sofa in a frame that was less expensive than the painting deserved, because, I would learn, it was the first piece Marisol had ever sold to her, the year Soline opened the gallery, and Soline had kept the frame Marisol had handed it to her in. The corkboard in her office had my Christmas card on it. Center, slightly to the left, pinned with a single brass tack. There were 2 other cards beside it, from artists. There was a postcard from her mother. There was a strip of black and white photo booth pictures of her at 11 years old with 2 cousins, all 3 making faces. The corkboard was not a shrine. It was a place a person kept the things she liked. I stood in front of it for a long time. You said it was on your corkboard, I said. I did not know if you meant it literally. I do not lie about objects, she said. 2 years ago, I said, you sent me a card with very nice typography and you put my response on a corkboard. Yes. Why? She came to stand beside me, not close, half a body width away, the way she always organized her proximity when she did not yet know what was permitted. Because you wrote me back, she said. I did not expect you to. The card was a courtesy. I was going to send 50 of them to people who had been kind to my artists. I sent 49. I made a list. I looked at the list for 3 days. I drew a line through your name twice. I redrew it once. I sat at my kitchen table with the envelope in front of me for an hour. I told myself it was a professional gesture and I addressed it and I dropped it at the post office on Houston Street on a Wednesday morning at 9. And on Thursday at 6 in the evening, you wrote me a 4-sentence email that said you had been moved by it. And I printed the email and put it in the same drawer of my desk where I kept the photograph of my grandmother, because that is the drawer where I keep the things I want to know I have but do not want to look at every day. I turned my head to look at her. You kept my email in the drawer with your grandmother's photograph. Yes. For 2 years. Yes. Soline. I know. That is not a courtesy. No, she said. It was not. I stood looking at the corkboard for another moment. Then I turned away from it because I had absorbed as much as I could absorb in one room. Make me lunch, I said. She made me lunch. She made me lunch the way she did everything, which was with the unhurried economy of a person who had been cooking for one person at a time for most of her adult life. She made a winter salad with shaved fennel and green apple and a soft cheese I had never had before. And she warmed a piece of bread that she had bought that morning, and she opened a bottle of white wine from a region of France I had never been to and would, by the end of the 30 days, have been to in conversation 11 times, because Soline Marchetti had opinions about Loire whites and was not afraid to share them. We sat at the pine table. What do you want to know first? She said. Tell me about the 4.5 years. She looked at me across the table. She set down her fork. She did not flinch. She did not perform the moment. She simply sat in it. I noticed you at the Devereaux opening, she said. The way I notice anyone at an opening, which is to say only briefly because I was working. You were wearing a dress that did not match the rest of the room, and I thought, that woman is here on purpose and the rest of these people are here because their assistants told them to be. About 40 minutes later, I was explaining a small painting to a younger collector, and I looked up and you were watching me explain it. Not the painting. Me. I was used to people watching the painting. You were watching the way I was talking about the painting. I caught your eye. You smiled. You turned away. I went back to the collector. I forgot you for about an hour. Then I saw you across the gallery again, talking to Marisol, who I represented for the first time that month, and I watched the way you asked her questions for about 3 minutes, and I thought, this woman is going to write something about Marisol that none of these other people would think to write, and I went over to introduce myself. I remember the introduction, I said. You do? You said your name, I said mine. You said you had been watching me ask Marisol questions and you were curious what magazine I was writing for. I said I was a senior editor at the magazine and that I was thinking about a profile. You said that the profile would be welcome. I said I would be in touch. You said you hoped I would be. We did not shake hands. You walked away. She had stopped eating. She was looking at me with a steady, almost frightening attention. You remember that exchange word for word? Yes. Marlowe. I know. You told me last night, in the hotel when I asked when you knew, that you knew at the Devereaux opening. I did. You remember the introduction word for word, but you did not, until last night, allow yourself to remember why you remembered. Correct. She picked up her wine glass, held it at the stem, the way she always held it. I have not eaten dinner without thinking about you for 43 months, she said. I am telling you that because you asked me to tell you about the 4.5 years, and that is the most accurate single sentence I can produce on the subject. I did not eat for a moment. That is what you wrote on the napkin, I said. Some version of that, about cataloging the way I held a glass. Yes, she said. I noticed. We had been mirroring each other for most of the night. I do not remember writing it. I know. I remember a green velvet sofa. That was where you sat down beside me. I remember a low table. Yes. What was the first thing I said when I sat down? She set her glass down. Her hand stayed on it for a moment. You said, she said carefully, that you had been carrying a sentence around for 5 years and that you needed to put it down before your friend's bachelorette weekend made you do something you would regret, and that you had decided the version of regret you were less afraid of was the one that came from saying it out loud. And then you said the sentence. What was the sentence? She looked at me across the pine table for a long moment. You asked me at the chapel never to repeat the sentence to you outside of a chapel, she said. You said you did not trust your sober self with it. So I am not going to tell you. But if you would like to come to a chapel with me sometime, I will repeat it to you there. I stared at her. Soline. I am keeping a promise I made to you 12 hours ago, she said. You can be angry at me about it, but it was your promise. That is the most maddening thing you have said to me in 24 hours. I am aware. I picked up my fork. I put it down. I picked up my wine. I drank some. Fine, I said. We will get to that. Yes. Soline. Yes. I am going to need you to keep being patient with me. I have, she said, had 4.5 years of practice. The afternoon went longer than I had planned. We finished the wine. We moved to her sofa, which was deep and worn and exactly the kind of sofa a person who lived alone bought when she was ready to stop pretending she was furnishing a public-facing apartment. We talked about the gallery and the magazine and the profile I had written about Marisol and the profile I had not written about her. I had pitched a profile of her to my editor in the spring of the previous year. The editor had said yes. I had written the first page 3 times and abandoned it 3 times. I told her this. She listened. You did not want to interview me, she said. No, I said. I wanted not to need to interview you to know you, and I knew, when I sat down to write the questions, that I did not know how to ask them without giving myself away. She took that in. Thank you, she said. For being able to say that to me on day 1. The light was starting to leave the windows. It was not yet the time when I needed to leave, but it was the time when I needed to know whether I was going to leave or stay. I stood up. I'm going to go home, I said. She nodded. She did not protest. She did not perform disappointment. She stood up. I will walk you down. You do not have to. I would like to. She walked me down. The doorman said good evening to her by surname. He did not say wife to me. We stood on the sidewalk in the gray light with a cab pulling up that she had hailed with one efficient gesture. I turned to her. Tomorrow? Tomorrow, she said. She did not lean in. She did not put a hand on my arm. She did not touch me. She had told me she would not touch me unless I asked her to, and she was, with the rigor of a woman who kept her promises whether anyone was watching or not, going to keep that promise even on a curb in Tribeca with no witnesses but the doorman. I got in the cab. The cab pulled away. I looked through the back window, and she was still standing on the sidewalk with her hands in her coat pockets, watching the cab go, and the part of me that had been protecting itself against this for 5 years finally allowed itself to register that I had been protecting myself against the wrong thing the entire time. The first week passed in a sequence I would not, even at the time, have been able to describe in a way that captured how full it was. We had dinner 3 times, lunch twice. We met at a coffee place near my office on a Wednesday, because I had a 45-minute window between meetings and she had an hour, and we used it the way people who have known each other for years use small windows, which was efficiently and without small talk. She came to a panel I moderated on Friday afternoon at a downtown art space. She sat in the back. I did not introduce her to anyone. She did not introduce herself to anyone. She watched me work for 90 minutes and then she walked out at the end without trying to claim the moment, and I found her at the coffee shop 2 blocks away when I finished, and she said, "You ask the question that the other panelists are circling around 20 minutes before they get to it, and you do it without making them feel slow." I had been moderating panels for 7 years. Nobody had ever told me that. Nobody had noticed. "Thank you," I said. "You are welcome," she said. That was the 3rd dinner. We had it at a Vietnamese place she liked on Mott Street that she had, I would later learn, taken 3 other people to in the last decade, and only the people who had mattered. I did not know this at the time. I would also have eaten the food anyway. I went to her gallery on day 8. It was a Thursday opening for an artist I had heard of, but did not know personally. Solene had told me the night before that I did not need to come. She had also told me that if I wanted to come, I would be welcome. I had told her I would think about it. I had thought about it for 10 hours. Then I had put on the cream slip dress, because the cream slip dress was now mine to keep, and I had put a black blazer over it, and I had taken a cab to the gallery at 7:45. The gallery was on the 2nd floor of a building on White Street, in a former warehouse with the original wooden beams left exposed and the floors sanded down to a pale honey color and the lighting calibrated, I would later learn, by Solene herself in consultation with a lighting designer she had been working with for 9 years. The opening was already busy when I arrived. The room had the particular hum of a successful art opening, the murmur of 40 conversations layered over each other, the clink of wine glasses, the sound of someone's heels on the wood floor near the entrance, the low vibration of a building where money and attention were both being exchanged in the same quiet, professional currency. Solene was in the gallery's main room when I walked in. She was wearing a navy suit with a jacket I had not seen before, and her hair was pinned, the way she pinned it for working, and she was talking to a collector with the directness she brought to every professional encounter. She did not see me come in. She was working. I stood at the edge of the room and I watched her work. She was, I now understood, extraordinary at her job. She moved between collectors and artists and the few critics in the room with the quiet, organized attention of a person who had built every relationship in the room by hand, one careful interaction at a time, over the course of 9 years. She did not flatter. She did not perform. She listened more than she talked. And when she talked, she said something specific, and the people she was talking to leaned in slightly, because what she was saying was worth leaning in for. I watched her redirect a critic toward a smaller piece in the back room with 2 sentences of completely accurate context. I watched her stand for 90 seconds with the artist's arm linked through hers, while the artist composed herself before going back out to talk with a collector who had been making her nervous. I watched her catch the eye of the gallery assistant from 12 feet away and communicate, with one small lift of her chin, that the assistant should bring a glass of water to the older critic in the corner who had been speaking for too long without one. She glanced up after about 4 minutes. She saw me. The look that crossed her face was a look I had not seen before. Not professional, not composed. Brief, undefended pleasure. She did not break away from the collector. She held the look across the room for 1 full second and then went back to her conversation, and the collector did not notice the second she had given me, because Solene had timed it precisely. The artist found me by the front desk at 8:30. She introduced herself. She said, "You must be Marlowe. Solene said you might come." Solene said you might come. I was a person Solene had told her artist about. I stood at the front desk of a gallery on a Thursday night in March, and a stranger I had just met knew my name and the relevant fact about it. She said the magazine might be interested in a piece, the artist said. "She is not wrong," I said. "She told me," the artist said, very quietly, with the same kind of small smile Nico had worn the morning after Vegas, "that she trusts your eye more than anyone else's in your field. I thought you should know." The artist excused herself. She walked away. I stood at the front desk and I thought about a woman who, in the course of 4.5 years, had told her artists that she trusted my eye, and had not told me that she had told her artists that she trusted my eye, and had instead simply waited for me to find out. Celine came over 20 minutes later when the room had thinned slightly. She stood beside me at the front desk with her hands clasped in front of her in the way she clasped them at openings, which was a posture of polite availability designed not to commit to leaving any one conversation. "You came," she said. "I came. Thank you." "Celine." "Yes. Did you tell Cassia I had a good eye?" She looked at me. "Yes," she said. "I tell every artist I work with that you have a good eye. I have been telling them that for 4 years. I do this because it is true, and because it serves them, not because it serves you. But I am not surprised she told you." I shook my head. "Not in disagreement. In something else. You have been quietly building my professional reputation in the gallery world for 4 years. I have been telling people the truth about your eye for 4 years," she said. "Those are different things." Celine. "Marlo, are you going to make this manageable for me at any point in the next 23 days? Or are you going to keep handing me information like this and watching me try to absorb it?" She thought about it. "The latter," she said. "I think." I looked at her. The navy suit, the pinned hair, the composed face that had, 20 minutes ago, been entirely undefended for a single second when she saw me come through the door. The hands clasped in front of her, professional, polite. "All right," I said. "All right? I will keep absorbing. Thank you." She was called away. She went. I stayed for another 40 minutes. I bought a small drawing I had not planned to buy from an artist I did not know, because the drawing was good and the gallery had paid the rent that morning by having me come in the door, and I wanted to participate in the economy of the thing. The gallery assistant rang me up. She said, "Celine mentioned you might be by. She said your discount is the same as the artist gets." I looked at the price tag. The discount was not small. "I am not taking the discount," I said. "She said you would say that," the assistant said. "What did she tell you to do if I said that?" "She said to apply it anyway." I stared at the assistant. The assistant smiled, very slightly, the way a person smiles when she has been instructed to do something she does not personally object to. I let her apply the discount. I walked out of the gallery with a drawing I would hang on my wall and a feeling I did not yet have a word for. The wedding band was still on my finger. I had stopped thinking about taking it off about 3 days into the 30. Day 11 was the day my coworker Lindy noticed. We were at a magazine staff meeting in the small conference room with the broken air conditioning, and I was tapping a pen against my notebook because my mind was on the gallery opening the night before, and Lindy reached across the table and grabbed my hand. "Marlo Pace." "Lindy, what is on your finger?" The room got quiet. 8 people had been pretending not to listen to what Lindy was about to say. They stopped pretending. I looked down at the bands. Platinum, brushed finish, stone, Vegas, I said, lightly. "Long story." "Marlo, that is 2 rings." "Yes." "Marlo." "I am aware, Lindy." "You went to Nico's bachelorette weekend single." "Yes." "You came back with a wedding band." "Yes." The 8 people had given up pretending. They were watching openly. My editor-in-chief was leaning back in his chair with his coffee, and he had the small, tolerant smile of a man who had been in this industry for 30 years and had seen enough to know that whatever was about to happen would either be brief and amusing or would consume the next 3 weeks of his life, and he was professionally curious about which. "Is there a person attached to the wedding band?" Lindy said. "There is." "In Vegas?" "In New York." "Marlo." "Lindy. Was this person at Nico's bachelorette weekend?" "This person was at Nico's bachelorette weekend." "As a guest of Nico's?" "Lindy. I am going to tell you about this at lunch. I am not going to tell you about this in a staff meeting. Can we please go back to discussing the issue?" We went back to discussing the issue. The 8 people did not stop watching me for the rest of the meeting. My editor-in-chief, when the meeting ended, said, "Pace," a word. He took me into his office. He closed the door. He looked at me from behind his desk with the same tolerant amusement. "I do not need the long story," he said. "I need to know if I am going to read about it on the gossip site by Friday." "You are not." "Are you sure?" "I am sure." "Is this person someone we cover?" I considered my answer. "This person owns a gallery in Tribeca that we have written about 3 times in the last 7 years, including a piece I wrote 18 months ago. There is no current conflict because there is no current piece in the queue. I am not going to be writing about the gallery. I will recuse on anything related to her or her artists." He nodded, slowly. "You do realize," he said, "that telling me you are recusing yourself from coverage of a major Tribeca gallery 12 hours after I find out you have been wearing a wedding ring for a week and a half is an unusual workday for me?" "I am sorry, John." "Do not be sorry. I have been doing this for 30 years, and you are the only senior editor I have whose private life has ever caused me to discover anything. I will take that trade. Just keep me informed. I will. Pace. Yes. Are you happy? I considered the question. I considered the 11 days. The cream slip dress, the pine table, the discount on the drawing, the cork board, the way Soline had looked across the gallery for 1 second and then gone back to her work. I think I might be, I said. That is a more complicated answer than a simple yes. I know. I am giving the simple yes time to catch up. He smiled. He waved me out. I went to lunch with Lindy. I told her some of the long story. I did not tell her all of it. The full version was not yet mine to tell, because the full version was still being decided. She listened, and at the end of the lunch she said, Marlo, I am going to say something you are probably not going to like, and I am going to say it because we have worked together for 6 years and I am the closest thing to a sister you have in this office. Okay. You have been talking about that woman for 2 years without realizing you have been talking about her. Every time her gallery has come up, every time one of her artists has shown anywhere. Do not let your brain talk you out of this because it happened in Vegas. Vegas is just where it finally got past your defenses. You let her happen. Do not unhappen her. I did not say anything for a moment. That is the most invested thing you have ever said to me about my private life, I finally said. I know. I have been waiting 2 years to say it. I laughed. I paid the check. I went back to the office. That night I had dinner at Soline's apartment. She made roast chicken. The apartment smelled like rosemary and garlic, and something else I would later learn was preserved lemon, which Soline kept in a jar on the counter because her grandmother had kept preserved lemon in a jar on the counter, and Soline had inherited the habit alongside the recipe. We sat at the pine table. We ate slowly. The wedding bands caught the candlelight. I said, Lindy noticed the rings today. She set down her fork. What did you tell her? Some of the truth. Not all of it. I told my editor-in-chief I was recusing from coverage of you and your artists. Marlo. It was the right call. It was the responsible call. It is also a real cost. I want to be honest about the real cost. I looked at her across the candlelight. I know it is a real cost, I said. I made the decision in the moment because I needed to make it cleanly and not have it be something I negotiated about over weeks. You are not going to make me feel bad about it. I am not trying to make you feel bad about it. I am trying to make sure you and I are looking at the same picture of what this is going to require. What is it going to require? She looked at me for a measured moment. The recusal at your magazine going forward indefinitely? A conversation at my gallery's board meeting next month, because 2 of my board members are friends of your editor-in-chief and I do not want them to find out from anyone but me. A consultation with my own attorney about how to disclose the marriage publicly when we are ready, and how to manage the press because there will be press, even if it is small. A version of every dinner party we attend together for the next 2 years, where some person we both know will have a question to ask one of us, and we will need to have decided in advance which of us is answering it. You have thought about this. I have thought about every version of this for 4.5 years, including the version where you said no in the chapel and went home with your friends and I never saw you at an opening again. I had to think about it, otherwise the want of it would have killed me. The table was very quiet. Soline. Yes. I am not letting you do all of this alone. She closed her eyes. For 1 second. When she opened them, the composure was, for the first time in 11 days, audibly, visibly cracking at the edges. Thank you, she said. The candle on the table flickered. I reached across the pine. I put my hand on the back of her hand, the first time I had touched her sober. She had not asked. I had not asked. The promise she had made was not to touch me unless I asked. The promise I had made was nothing. I was inside a kitchen on the 4th floor of a building that had once been a printing house, reaching across a table with the small, deliberate motion of a woman who had decided that the next thing was going to be the next thing. She did not move her hand. Marlo, she said quietly. Yes. Did you ask? No. That is allowed. I know. She turned her hand over under mine, palm up. Our fingers laced together once and stayed. We finished dinner with 1 hand each. The chicken was excellent. The wine was Loire. I would, by the end of the meal, have heard about the Loire region for the 11th time, and I would have started to suspect that I was developing opinions of my own about Loire whites, which I would have kept to myself for now because I did not yet feel ready to have opinions about Loire whites in front of a person who had been having opinions about Loire whites for 15 years. She walked me to the door at 10:30. I had told her on day 1 that I would not stay over for the 30 days because I needed the structure, because I needed to be able to come home to my own apartment and think. She had agreed without argument. She was, even now, holding to the agreement. I was not. I want to ask you something, I said. Yes. Will you kiss me? She looked at me for a long, full second. The composure was holding, but it was holding by a thread. Are you sure? Yes. Marlo. Solene. I have been waiting to do this for 4.5 years, and I am going to need you to be very sure. I am very sure. She lifted her hand. She touched my jaw. The pads of her fingers were warm. She brought her face close to mine slowly, with the same unhurried economy she brought to everything, and she kissed me. Once. Patient. Earned. The kind of kiss that had been getting itself ready for 4.5 years and had finally arrived in the hallway of a 4th-floor apartment in Tribeca on a Thursday night at 10:30 with both of us awake and sober and not arguing about the chapel. When she stepped back, her composure was gone. Not chaotic, just, finally, set down. Her eyes were wet at the very edges, in a way she would have in a public room immediately corrected for, but in her own front hallway with no one but me watching, she let stay. Her hand was still at my jaw. She did not move it for a moment. She looked at me with the entirety of 4.5 years finally arriving at the same address as the rest of her. Good night, she said. Good night. She closed the door behind me. I stood in the hallway for 30 seconds. I walked to the elevator. I wrote it down. The doorman wished me a good evening. I got into a cab. The cab driver said something polite. I do not remember what I said back. I remember the particular feeling of my own jaw under my own fingertips an hour later, in the bathroom of my apartment, with the bathroom light on and the bathroom door closed, when I touched the place she had touched and tried to memorize the warmth of her hand and the patience with which she had brought her face to mine. I sat on the kitchen floor when I got home. I looked at the wedding band. I looked at the second band, the one with the stone. I thought about the kiss. I thought about the 4.5 years she had been waiting for it. I thought about the 4.5 years I had not allowed myself to know I had been waiting for it. Then I did the thing I should not have done. I called my attorney. This is the part of the story I have to tell honestly, even though I do not love the version of myself in it. On day 17, after a kiss on a Thursday and 3 more days of dinners and 1 entire afternoon spent in her bed with our clothes on talking about what we had each done with our 20s, I called my attorney and asked her to walk me through what an annulment would actually look like. I did this not because I wanted an annulment. I did this because I was afraid. I had told myself I was being responsible. I had told myself it was due diligence. I had told myself it was the kind of grown-up information gathering that any person making a permanent commitment ought to do. But I knew, at the center of myself, that I had called my attorney because the kiss in the hallway had been the most undefended I had ever been with another human being, and the part of me that had been protecting itself for 32 years had decided, at 3 in the morning on day 17, that the protection needed an exit ramp. The attorney was a woman named Elsa Park, whom I had used twice before for contract review. She listened. She asked clarifying questions. She told me that an annulment in New York required mutual agreement on the basis of incapacity at the time of marriage, that without Solene's signature it would be a contested process, and that based on the evidence I described, including the video and the witness affidavits and the certified marriage certificate and the napkin, a contested annulment would not succeed. The marriage was valid. My options were divorce, which would take 6 months minimum and would require grounds, or remaining married. Marlo, Elsa said at the end, I am going to ask you something and you can decline to answer. Okay. Do you want the marriage? I did not answer immediately. I think I do, I said. Then why am I on the phone with you at 4 in the afternoon on a Tuesday? I did not have an answer. I will not bill you for this call, she said. I would like you to think about why you called me, and call me back if you have a real reason, and not call me back if you do not. I have been your attorney for 6 years. I am being your friend now. Thank you, I said. She hung up. I sat at my desk in my office with the door closed and I tried to figure out why I had called her. The answer arrived in stages over the next 2 hours. The answer was that I was afraid, not of Solene, of the size of what was happening, of having, in the course of 17 days, accumulated enough evidence that I had been wrong about my own life for 5 years that the recalibration was going to require me to reevaluate every decision I had made in those 5 years. Of the fact that I had walked around for half a decade telling myself I was happy, and now I was finding out that I had been adjacent to happy without knowing the difference, and the woman who had been holding a glass at the edge of every room of my life had been the person who could have made the difference. That was the kind of thing that made a person panic. I had panicked. I had called the attorney because my brain had decided that calling an attorney was an action it could take that would feel like control. I did not tell Solene. I should have told Solene. I knew in real time that I should have told Celine. I told myself I would tell her later. I told myself I needed to think first. I told myself it was nothing. It was, of course, not nothing. It was the first dishonesty of our marriage, and I was 19 days into a 30-day window during which I had agreed, in spirit if not in writing, to be honest with the woman who had been honest with me from the moment I woke up in the hotel room. She found out. She found out because Elsa Park, in addition to being a New York family attorney, had been, 8 years earlier, a young associate at the firm that Soline's gallery used for routine contract work, and Elsa and Soline had gotten coffee twice a year for 6 years. Elsa called Soline on day 20, not to discuss me, but to invite her to dinner. Over the dinner, which Soline attended on day 21, Elsa said, conversationally, "I had a strange call this week from a former client about a Vegas wedding," and Soline said, calmly, the way she said everything, "Was the client a magazine editor named Marlowe Pace?" Elsa, to her credit, immediately apologized for the inadvertent breach. She said, "I should not have raised it. I did not know you knew her." Soline said, "Do not apologize. The information is mine to know, and I would rather know it from you in a kindly way than discover it on my own in an unkindly one." Elsa said, "She did not retain me. She asked questions. I told her there were no real options without your cooperation. She thanked me. We have not spoken since." Soline said, "Thank you." They finished dinner. They talked about other things. Elsa walked Soline to her cab. Soline went home. She did not call me that night. She did not call me the next morning. She did not call me the morning after that. On day 23, I noticed the silence. We had been speaking every day, multiple times, a morning text, a lunch text, an evening call or in-person dinner. The silence, when it arrived, was not loud. It was simply a hollowing, the absence of something I had been receiving without realizing I had come to count on it. I texted her at noon, "How was your day?" She wrote back at 4. "Good. How is yours?" I texted her at 6. "Are you free tonight?" She wrote back at 7. "I have a board call." "Tomorrow?" I texted her tomorrow. "Lunch?" She wrote back, "I have a meeting, Friday." It went on. Polite. Unfailingly polite. The composure had returned. Not the cold version of it, the kind one. But the kind version of her composure was still composure, and I knew on day 25 with absolute certainty that something had happened, and that I was not going to find out what until she chose to tell me. I noticed every small thing, the way her texts arrived a little later in the morning than they had been arriving for the previous 2 weeks. The way she had stopped using my first name in writing, addressing me with no salutation at all, the way one writes to a colleague one is being careful with, the way the offers to make plans were always for 2 days out, never for tonight, never for tomorrow. The way she had not, for 4 days, said anything that she had not strictly needed to say. She was being kind, she was being available, she was being polite. And the politeness was, I now understood, the cleanest possible signal she could send that something had shifted, without naming what had shifted. Because Soline Marchetti did not corner people, and she was not going to corner me into a conversation she had decided I would have to start. I called Nico. "Nico. Babe. I think something is wrong. Soline has gone polite. Soline has gone polite. She is texting like an acquaintance. She is not making time for me. She is. She is the same to me she was on day 1. Except day 1 was directness and now it is. I do not know what this is." Marlowe. "What? I need you to think very hard. What did you do?" "I did not do anything." Marlowe. "I called my attorney." On day 17. A long silence. "Babe." "Yes." "Did you tell Soline you called your attorney?" "No." "Did you call your attorney to ask about an annulment?" "Yes." "Babe." Nico. "Whose attorney is your attorney?" "Elsa Park." "Has Elsa Park ever met Soline?" "I do not know." Find out now." I found out. I called Elsa. I asked her very carefully if she had ever met Soline Marchetti. Elsa was silent for a moment. Then she said, "Marlowe, I want you to know that I did not tell her anything substantive about your conversation. We have been friends for years. I mentioned that you had called. She had questions about whether I had said anything specific. I said no. I am very sorry. I sat at my desk. I put my forehead against my desk. I sat there for a long moment. Marlowe, it is not your fault, Elsa. I should have told her myself. Thank you for being honest with me now." "Marlowe, are you all right?" "I am about to find out." I hung up. I went home. I did not text Soline. I did not call. I packed a small bag. because the next decision was not one I was going to make over the phone. I took a cab to Tribeca. I rode the elevator to the 4th floor. I knocked on her door. She opened the door. She was wearing a simple gray sweater and dark jeans. Her hair was loose. She looked at me for a long moment in the doorway. Marlo. I called my attorney on day 17. She did not say anything. I called her because I was afraid. I was afraid of the size of the thing that was happening. I was not going to file for anything. I was looking for an exit ramp because the kiss in your hallway on day 14 was the most undefended I have ever been, and my brain decided at 3 in the morning that the undefendedness needed a fire escape. I should have told you. I knew at the time I should have told you. I did not tell you. That is on me. I am telling you now. She stood in the doorway. She did not move. Will you let me in? I said. She stepped back. I came in. I set the bag down by the door. I turned to face her. She closed the door behind me. We stood in the front hall in the lamplight. Why did you not tell me? She said. Because I knew that telling you would mean I had to look at why I called. And looking at why I called would mean admitting I was scared. And I did not want to admit I was scared because I had spent the previous 16 days telling you I was sure, and I was scared that being scared on day 17 was going to make me a liar. Marlo. I know. Being scared is not being a liar. Being scared and not telling me was being a liar. Those are different things, and you are old enough to know the difference. I know. She looked at me for a long, long moment. The composure was holding, but I could see now, finally, all the way through it. I could see what it had cost her to be polite for 4 days. I could see that the 4 days had been her version of an exit ramp. She had not been pulling away. She had been giving me the option to leave the way she had found out I had wanted to leave on day 17, because the version of her that had been waiting for me for 4.5 years was not going to use the marriage to keep me in the building if the building was a building I was trying to find the door out of. You were giving me a way out, I said. She did not answer. You were going polite for 4 days because you found out I had called my attorney and you did not want me to feel cornered. She said very quietly. Yes. Solene. Marlo. I am not trying to leave. I needed to make sure of that. I know. I needed to make sure you were not staying because you were embarrassed to leave, or because the rings were still on your finger, or because you had told your editor-in-chief and could not figure out how to walk it back. I know. I needed to know that if you left, you would leave because you wanted to, and not because the structure of the situation made leaving inconvenient. I know. I also needed, she said, and her voice did the thing it had not done since the chapel, the small breaking under the surface, to give myself 4 days to learn how to live in a world where you might walk back through this door tonight and tell me you were leaving. Because I have been carrying you for 4.5 years, Marlo, and the version of carrying you that includes you choosing to leave is a version I had not yet had to live in for more than a few hours, and I needed the 4 days. I stared at her. You were practicing, I said. Yes. Solene. She did not answer. She was looking at the floor. I am not leaving, I said. She looked up. I am not leaving. I called the attorney because I was afraid. I was afraid of the size of the thing. I am still afraid of the size of the thing. I am going to be afraid of the size of the thing for some time yet. But I am not going to use the size of the thing as a reason to leave the thing. Marlo. Solene. You should have told me about the call. I should have. That is the deal. I do not need you to be unafraid. I need you to tell me when you are afraid, so I can be afraid with you, and not find out about it from a former colleague at a dinner I should have skipped. I will tell you. Every time. Every time. She stepped forward. I stepped forward. We met in the middle of her front hall, and she put her arms around me and held me, the way she had not held me in 17 days, and I held her back the way I had been wanting to hold her since the chapel I did not remember. We stood there for a long time. I am sorry I did not tell you, I said into her shoulder. I know. I am sorry it took 23 days for me to learn the lesson. I know. Solene. Yes. Thank you for the 4 days. She pulled back a little. She looked at me. They were the longest 4 days I have had in 4.5 years, she said. I know. Do not do that again. I will not. She kissed me. It was different from the first one. The first one had been patient, earned, a culmination. This one was simpler. It was a kiss between two people who had just made a decision together, and were, both of them, on the same side of it now. Her hand stayed at my jaw afterward, the same place it had stayed on day 14, except this time the staying was permission instead of caution, and we both understood the difference without naming it. I stayed. I had told her on day 1 that I would not stay for the 30 days. I broke that promise on day 23. She did not invoke the original agreement. I did not pretend the original agreement was still in force. We had renegotiated. The renegotiation had been the conversation in the front hall, and the renegotiation had consisted of two things. I would tell her when I was afraid, and she would tell me when she was practicing. We sat at her pine table at midnight in our pajamas, hers a long gray cotton shirt and mine an old t-shirt I had brought in the bag, and we ate cold leftover pasta out of the same bowl with 2 forks, and she told me about the 4 days, about the cab she had taken home from the dinner with Elsa, about the way she had stood in her kitchen for an hour without taking her coat off, about the moment, on day 21, when she had decided that she was not going to call me and ask me what I had told my attorney, about the moment, on day 22, when she had drafted a letter to me that said you have my unconditional release if you want it, and had written it in 3 different ways, and had not sent any of them, because the right version of unconditional release was not a letter. It was 4 days of polite distance to give me room to decide whether I wanted the door to open or close. That was the right version, I said. I know, she said. I have been thinking about how to give people unconditional release for most of my adult life. I am very good at it by now. Solene. What? I am sorry your skill set includes that. She smiled, tired, real. Me too, she said. We slept in her bed. We did not have to navigate around anything we had not already navigated around. We slept the way 2 people sleep who have been sleeping in each other's general direction for 4.5 years and have finally arrived at the same address. I woke up at 3 in the morning with her arm across my ribs and the small steady breath of her at the back of my neck and the wedding band glinting in the dark, and I thought about the version of myself that had sat on the kitchen floor on day 0 with her phone in her hand and pressed send on the words 30 days, and I wanted, very badly, to thank that version of myself for being brave on the right thing for once in her life. The 30 days finished on day 30. I had told myself at the start of it that I would announce my decision at midnight. The whole point of the 30 days was that there had been a clock, and a clock that did not end when it was supposed to end was not a clock. So on day 30, in the evening, we made dinner together at her apartment, which was now, by any reasonable standard, our apartment, since I had been sleeping there for 7 of the previous 9 nights, and after dinner we sat at the pine table with the candle lit and the bottle of Loire White I now had opinions about, and I waited for the right moment. The right moment was at 11:48. Solene. Yes? It is 12 minutes to midnight. I am aware. I am supposed to make a decision at midnight. I am aware of that too. I am going to make it now. She set down her wine glass. Whenever you are ready. I looked at her across the candle. The corkboard with my Christmas card was visible through the open door of her office. The small Marisol Aguero hung over the sofa. The pine table held the dent I would, by the end of the year, learn the story of, and the dent I would, by the end of the year, learn the story of, and the third dent that even Solene did not remember the origin of and that we would, over the years, invent and reinvent new stories for, because some dents are too old to be assigned a single biography. I want to stay married to you, I said. She held my eyes. All right, she said. I have wanted to stay married to you since approximately day 3. All right. I called my attorney on day 17 because I was afraid, but I had already wanted to stay by then. I want to be honest about that. I called her because I was afraid, not because I was unsure. Those are different things, and I have been thinking about the difference between them for 13 days, and I want to be sure you understand the difference. I understand the difference. I want to stay married to you because you have been the largest unspoken fact of my life for 5 years, and I am tired of unspoken facts, and you are not unspoken anymore. And I would rather have you spoken for the rest of my life than live another 5 years pretending I did not notice the way you held a glass. She looked at me for a long time. Marlo. Yes. You are saying the napkin again. I know. You are saying it sober. I know. She stood up. She walked around the pine table. She knelt next to my chair, the way I must have knelt in the chapel I did not remember, the way she had only described to me once, because she had been keeping a promise to me about a sentence I had asked her not to repeat outside a chapel. She put her hand on my knee. She looked up at me. Marlo Pace, she said. Yes. For 4.5 years I have been not asking you something. Solene, will you stay married to me? I cried. Once. Briefly. Because the version of her that had spent 4.5 years not asking me something was now asking me something, and the version of me that had been not letting myself notice the asking was now noticing it, and the noticing was the only thing left that needed to happen in the kitchen of a 4th-floor apartment in Tribeca on a Saturday night at 11:53. Yes, I said. She kissed me. Briefly, this time. Then she put her forehead against mine and stayed there. You did not need to ask me at midnight, she said. I know. You asked me at 11:52. That is the time on the certificate. I know. I wanted the time to match. I know. The candle on the table burned down a little. She got up. She came back with the bottle of Loire White. She refilled both glasses. We sat at the pine table at 11:55 at night on day 30 and drank wine and talked about other things, because the decision had been made and the decision did not need to be discussed any further, and the rest of the night was just two people deciding what to do with the rest of an evening. The next morning was a Sunday. We slept until 10. We had coffee in bed. She had a paper she had not read. I had a book I had been ignoring. We sat against the headboard with the wedding bands on our fingers in the gray morning light from the window above her bed, and we read for 45 minutes without speaking, because the kind of silence we now had was a silence that did not need to be filled. 6 months later, we had a small dinner at the gallery for the people who needed to know in person. Nico was there. Lindy was there. My editor-in-chief was there, because he had asked, with characteristic dryness, whether he could come, and Soline had said yes immediately, because she had made a list of every person whose blessing I needed, and my editor-in-chief had been on the list. Soline's mother flew up from Charleston. 3 of her artists came. Marisol Aguero came. The doorman from her building came, because Soline had invited him and he had taken the night off, and he sat at the table beside the gallery assistant and held her hand under the table at one point during the toast, which I noticed because I had been paying attention to small things since approximately day 3. My editor-in-chief gave a toast. Then Nico gave one. Then, very briefly, Soline's mother stood up. She was a small woman with short white hair and a Charleston accent she had never quite given up. She did not say much. She said, "I have been waiting to meet this person for 2 years. Soline has been mentioning her since the Christmas before last. I am very glad to be here." She sat down. Soline's eyes did not move from her mother's face for a long moment afterward. "You told your mother about me at Christmas the year before last," I said quietly. "Yes. You did not even know me yet, technically. I knew you, Marlo. I had been knowing you for 3 years by then. The only difference was that I had not yet sent the card." I held her hand under the pine table. The pine table had been moved to the gallery for the dinner, because I had asked her, quietly, the week before, whether we could use it, because the pine table was where the actual marriage had been settled, and she had agreed. I held her hand. I leaned over to her. "I love you," I said, quietly, to her ear. The first time I had said it sober and outside of a chapel, I did not remember. She closed her eyes for 1 second. The composure was holding. The cost of the composure was visible only to me, the way it had always been. "I love you too," she said. The dinner went late. The doorman walked the gallery assistant home. Nico cried twice, both times briefly. Soline's mother and my editor-in-chief, somehow, against all odds, became friends, and would still be exchanging Christmas cards 7 years later. Marisol Aguero painted a small piece for us as a wedding gift, which we hung over the pine table in the apartment in Tribeca, where it would remain for the rest of my life. Lindy, halfway through dessert, leaned over to me and said, "Pace, I just want to be on record. I called this 2 years ago." She gestured with her wine glass at the room, at Soline across the gallery, at the corkboard visible through the open door of the office, at the entire constructed evidence of a life that had been waiting to be lived. 2 years ago. I want it documented. I said, "It is documented. I am writing it down." She said, "Make sure you spell my name right." I said I would. I have. I stood at the front desk of the gallery at 11:30 at night, in the same spot where I had stood on day 8, and I looked across the gallery at my wife. She was talking with 3 people I now knew. She caught my eye. She held it across the room. She did not break away. She did not perform the moment. She just looked at me, the way she had been looking at me for 5 years, and I looked back, the way I had been looking at her for 5 years, and the difference now was that we were both, finally, doing the looking on purpose. Some marriages start in chapels. Some marriages start the morning after, with a stranger in a chair watching you sleep who turns out to not be a stranger at all. Some marriages, if you are lucky, begin a 5th time, in a hallway, with a kiss that has been getting itself ready for 4.5 years. We have had ours start, by my count, at least 3 of those ways. None of the start dates have been wrong. The wedding band on my finger is the same wedding band I woke up with on day 0, in a hotel suite I had not booked, in Las Vegas, at 6 in the morning, in the gray gold light, with a woman across from the bed who had been waiting for me for a very long time. I have stopped trying to remember the chapel. She has not. She tells me, sometimes, on quiet nights, what I said. The full version. The sentence she promised at the chapel never to repeat to me outside of one. We have, in 7 years, returned to a chapel exactly once. Not in Las Vegas. A small one in upstate New York, on a fall weekend, with no witnesses but the woman who ran the chapel and her dog. We did not get married again. We did not need to. We sat in the chapel for 40 minutes. The light through the small windows was the gray gold of late afternoon in October. Solene leaned over to me at one point. She put her mouth near my ear. She said the sentence I had written on the napkin, in full, for the first time since the night I had originally said it. I will not repeat it here. It belongs in chapels. But I will tell you this. The version of me who said it to her at 11:52 on a Tuesday night in Las Vegas, drunk on bourbon, kneeling on a chapel floor, was not lying, and was not foolish, and was not making a mistake. She was simply saying the thing my sober self had been not saying for 5 years, in the only language she had access to that night. The language of bourbon and a cocktail napkin and a chapel 3 blocks from the Bellagio. In elegant language, it did its job. I have been grateful to her ever since.